take the opportunity to introduce our panelists. Before we get into this conversation, these perspectives of these three panelists today, you've got a client who has made the journey into enterprise, you have an expert who guides migrations, and you have support team that is available on the other side once you are with enterprise. So first we have Joe Thornton. He's the GIS software supervisor of Santa Rosa County, Florida. He manages county network architecture and spatial data for the county's mapping programs and the infrastructure behind Santa Rosa County's next generation 911 systems. Joe built much of his expertise the hard way as a self-taught programmer and database engineer who's worked across PC and network repair, disaster recovery, database software design, all bringing that into public service. Joe is also in the front lines of Santa Rosa County's move from ArcGIS Online and on-premise infrastructure to ArcGIS Enterprise in the cloud. Our second panelist. Thanks, Joe. Our second panelist is Todd Buhlman. He's the Vice President of Business Solutions at Logic Solutions Group. Todd brings more than 20 years of experience in the leadership, architecture, and delivery of enterprise software solutions with deep specialization in both Microsoft-based technologies and Esri GIS platforms. He works with organizations to envision what their GIS platform should become, design the architecture to get there, and deliver it. He's led migrations across some of the most demanding environments in AEC, utilities, energy, transportation, and state and local government. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you.
Our third panelist is Rachel Jordan, Client Success Manager at Rock Technologies. Rachel's career started in the field in environmental permitting and construction at TRC companies, where she spent over a decade as a GIS analyst and project manager before becoming GIS team leader and administrator for both ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. She's been the person responsible for keeping an enterprise environment running, managing the platform from the inside, and understanding what it actually costs a GIS team to own that responsibility. At Rock, she helps clients navigate exactly that transition from migration through to long-term success with ArcGIS Enterprise in the cloud. Welcome. All right, so quickly, before we dive in, I do want to just launch a quick poll to understand a bit more about where you guys are, the audience. So if you could just help us understand a little bit about which platforms is your organization currently using. You can select all that apply. It's not a single select, but we would love to know. Are you on ArcGIS Online, Enterprise on-premise, Enterprise in the cloud, a hybrid solution? And then also kind of what are the main drivers for your organization's interest in ArcGIS Enterprise? There's a lot of reasons, and you'll hear some of those from our panelists today, but curious kind of what is your main consideration. I'll give you a quick moment to get those in. Awesome. While you guys are finishing that up, I will just quickly go through our agenda. We do have a panel discussion kind of in 4 parts, right? We're going to talk about is it time and how to recognize that tipping point, making the move and what kind of the planning and execution of that looks like. And then of course, life and enterprise, the benefits and the opportunities, and then sustaining it, right? What does it take to kind of keep it moving? Then we'll leave the time for audience Q&A like I mentioned, and then we'll hear some final takeaways from our panelists, just so that you guys can action on kind of what would be the next steps. All right, let's see. We're going to end this poll. All right, so it looks like the majority are on ArcGIS Online and hybrid. Those are really kind of where people are sitting at the moment. And I'm curious. All right, so it looks like where we've got a kind of an even split here, but most importantly, the main drivers are around data management, new capabilities / expansion of GIS. Those are really the top ones. And then a close third would be around cost and licensing structure. So panelists, just keep that in mind if we can provide any more clarity on those drivers. Okay, so the next piece of this, before we dive in, I'm going to hand it over to Rachel. We just want to make sure that everybody here understands kind of the topic today at a high level, and then we'll get into the panel.
Great, thanks, Jen. Yeah, so we wanted to go over quickly just the difference between ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. They're both Esri products for storing, mapping, analyzing, and sharing data. And so ArcGIS Online is Esri's software as a service. They've hosted it themselves, and it has their data stores on the backside, which means that you can't really access those in any direct way. Um, but some people like that because you don't need to worry about that part. And then ArcGIS Enterprise is the solution for folks who want to stand up their own environment, whether that's on site in servers in a server room or in the cloud. And that consists of a few basic parts: the portal, the ArcGIS server, the relational data store, and the web adapter. And those are the main pieces, sort of the front end, and then the way of sharing the data, where the data is stored. And those can be connected to an enterprise geodatabases from a SQL server or other database provider. So those are the big differences. And uh, you don't have to choose just one. As a lot of you, it sounds like, are thinking about or already doing, those two pieces that can work together. You can have both ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the advantages of both.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to start talking a bit. So, Joe, I think it would be great if you could kick us off and really share, like, what were the signs for Santa Rosa County that ArcGIS Online wasn't quite meeting the needs? And like, did it happen? Like, was there one moment, or kind of did it build over time?
So it was definitely a build over time. I will say the decision for us to move to enterprise in the cloud was that decision was made before I came into the role that I'm in now with the county. I was a programmer for the county, but there for years had been um, kind of an insight that everything seems to be technology wise going towards the cloud. And ArcGIS Online, of course, is in the cloud, but we were in a hybrid solution where we had an older version of Enterprise on premises. And the sign for us was just aging hardware, older versions that we weren't prepared or ready to move to in as far as upgrading Enterprise. And we didn't want to do that on-prem and try to take on all of that ourselves. And so the sign for us was like, okay, this is the direction we're going, is we want it in the cloud. We want to take advantage of all the capabilities that the new versions offer. And AGOL, or ArcGIS Online, just doesn't give us all the capabilities that we want or think we need. And so talking with Rock, we actually have a relationship with Rock that goes way back for years. And talking with them, they recommended, let's just move you guys all at once to enterprise in the cloud. And that's what pushed us that way.
Hmm. Um, Todd, I'm curious. You do quite a you help quite a few different types of organizations. Is this a familiar story? Like, kind of what are other reasons that you other clients have come to you with?
Sure. At the end of the day, it's usually some sort of function of size and complexity of the organization. And so if it gets big enough, it seems like there becomes drivers to move, or if it becomes complex enough. So sometimes you have small organizations that are very complex and the other way around, obviously. But generally speaking, it seems to be a growth pattern where it gets big enough and the organization says, there's functionality that we're not getting in ArcGIS Align that we know we want to use because we're becoming more mature. Or the other component of that too is sometimes there's just a standard IT mandate. You've got people that back up the databases on a nightly basis. And they're like, well, why aren't we backing this up in the same way? And why is this different? How is this different? So you kind of sometimes have an IT driver, but generally speaking, it's the functionality side of things. So, for instance, versioning. If you wanted to do versioning or topology or a lot of these things that usually come with a little more complexity and maturation within the organization, that's when you start saying, I really need to be an enterprise to take advantage of all this good stuff.
Nice. I'm just to stick with you, Todd. So like, okay, so these are the drivers. This is kind of what you experience. Like what does that look like? Like how, okay, so here it is. Like people want functionality. They come to you. Like what does success look like and how does it happen?
Sure. So lots of different ways to do that. I mean, and it's kind of uh, trying to figure out what that migration path looks like for a client. So it's really first, let's do a cost benefit analysis and to say whether or not that's actually something that is it just one small thing you're trying to get out of Esri, and so it's maybe a decent amount of work to get you out of ArcGIS Online into Enterprise, and so is that really worth it? Or to really look at like this is really going to benefit our organization and it's more strategic for us. So those conversations are where it starts. And then that leads into really putting estimates together and doing inventories and really looking at kind of what needs to come down and looking what the benefits of ArcSDE would be for you and going from hosted feature layers in ArcGIS Online, which is the way that it handles data down into a relational database. What does that mean for you? And how can that maybe help the rest of the organization in other ways? So you start looking for other benefits and you start looking for ways to kind of justify the whole thing, and then you plan it out just like anything else. And certainly, I can talk about migration planning until the cows gone home. So let me know if you want to dive into that.
Yeah. I first want to hear kind of Joe, so Todd, you walked through a lot of things like here are the
Sure.
things that you like. Joe, talk to us a little bit or share a little bit about your specific process and like how, did you answer all these questions? Was that the approach?
Yeah, Todd's had me shaking my head the whole time when he mentioned things like versioning. We weren't, I mentioned that we had an older version of Enterprise, so technically we had Enterprise, but there's so much of it, especially in the older versions, that we weren't taking advantage of. We weren't using versioning. So it's like we have a small team, granted, but all of our analysts were editing under basically the same user account. And that brings all sorts of issues with it, security issues, and uh, the knowing who's doing what. And sorry, my phone's going off and distracting me. But the the portal is one thing that Rachel mentioned earlier, is included with Enterprise. We kept hearing our Esri representatives mention portal. Oh, with portal, you can do this. With portal, you can do that. And we were like, portal, what's portal? Come to find out, once we got into this thing and Rock helped us so much to understand what we were getting. Portal is the same thing as ArcGIS Online, but it's your own copy of the portal. And so once we had that and we sort of learned the language, the correct language to use, um, a lot of things clicked and made sense for us and just enabled us to for enabled our GIS to be so much more than it was in making that move. Um, so
Joe,
yeah,
can I ask
the
you a question?
planning. Yeah, sure.
So I was going to ask too. I know a couple of the things that come with enterprise as well are the enterprise extensions. One of those is utility network and all the tooling that goes with that. Are you guys looking at UN?
Honestly, no, I'm not. There's still so much about GIS, and I'm not really, I don't have a GIS background. I'm more of a database and database guy and programmer. So I've been really learning, starting as a GIS novice coming into this, not knowing the terminology, not knowing all the different components, bits and parts. So I want to, those who are watching, I want to make them aware that you don't have to know everything there is to know about this stuff to make this move, make this transition. So for instance, the thing you mentioned, the what was it, UN? I've never heard of it. Uh,
Sure.
we're still utilizing what we're utilizing in enterprise and taking baby steps using, now we can publish services directly to the portal. That's revolutionary for us. We've never done this before. And then when our users who are less familiar with it than we are, when they start seeing the benefit of these new technologies that are making things easier to do, easier to interact with our mapping, that's life changing for us.
Very cool. I just mentioned that we can move on, but I know there's a lot of local state government people on the call, and a lot of local state governments are following kind of the larger utility models, which are to put their water networks and other infrastructure networks into UN, which is kind of the latest and greatest. It gives you some real great tools, but you can't run that at ArcGIS Online today. It's an enterprise extension. So
Sounds exciting.
yeah, it's cool. We'll talk
Joe,
about
we can talk about that on our next client meeting if you want.
There we go.
it.
I love it. I love it. Um, Joe, was there anything that sort of caught you off guard, or that I mean, it's interesting because you're sort of saying like we're using enterprise, but we don't really know everything that's in there. But like at the moment of kind of making the switch there, was there anything that was that surprised you, or something that caught you off guard? I'm just curious, because I think it's like when you're like, oh, I had this, but now I'm really understanding how to leverage it. Like, was there anything that,
So,
yeah.
so everything, just everything.
All right.
We had an awesome GIS coordinator when I was a programmer here at the county, who had her doctorate. So she knew the ins and outs of GIS. And I've worked with a lot of great GIS professionals over my career, but didn't know it myself. I would hand them a list of, an Excel file with a bunch of addresses and say, can you geocode these for me? I think I'm using the right term. So she actually got a great job opportunity she couldn't pass up after pulling the trigger with Rock to take us to the cloud. And so it got handed to me. So I started this night as a complete novice, not and telling everybody I'm not a GIS person. I'm not a GIS person. So everything caught me by surprise. But also my team, my awesome team, um, that included a couple of GIS analysts who had been with the county for years. They were caught off guard and by surprise by a lot because they were still using ArcMap for a lot of their GIS work. And Esri had been encouraging us, hey, ArcMap's going to go away. You're going to need to learn, you're going to need to do everything in ArcGIS Pro. And they were very resistant to the idea. And they talked about me dragging them kicking and screaming through the process. Because once we went to enterprise and we upgraded our database, our SDE, SQL database engine, uh, geodatabase, we upgraded it to a certain version. There was no going back to ArcMap. So we were sort of forced into, okay, this is our new world in GIS. So
Well, so
that transition definitely.
if everything was sort of surprising and you were kind of learning as you were going, like, how did you sequence it? Like, how did you know what to do when?
Well, we cried out for help to Rock. So I'll tell everybody here, I'm a big fan of Rock, and and we went to them and said we had before Rachel, who's now our customer success manager, we had Maddie, and she was awesome, but we would have regular meetings with Maddie planning this stuff out, and we just looked, like Todd was saying, we looked at the size of our organization, the size of our databases, what we prioritized, what is most critical for us to have working first. And we just started there, just took things one step at a time and said, okay, now we're going to migrate these apps. Now we're going to migrate those apps. We started out, we had a lot in ArcGIS Online that we had public facing. And the first thing for us to do that was, I won't say a surprise, we knew it was coming, but the first big thing for us was versioning. And that's been mentioned a couple times already because we hadn't used versioning. That was huge. It's like, okay, what are we talking about? How do these different versions work? What's the structure of this thing? There's like a hierarchy, a sort of tree structure for this. And of course, I brought my database experience into that. And so, with a little bit of explanation from some of the experts at Rock, I built an understanding of how that worked. And then I worked with one of our programmers who actually built us a tremendous set of Python scripts that helped us reconcile and post all our user versions up to a higher or lower, depending on which way you flip that structure, up to a different version. And that took time. That took time, especially because we now have apps that are in integrations with other applications that are communicating with versions that our users don't use. And so there was a lot there that was surprising that, we had to figure out how it was going to work. But once we did figure it out, let me tell you, it has just really, really revolutionized our
Ah,
workflows.
hold that thought for a minute. I want to talk a little bit more. I want to get some feedback from Todd on like his experience and other clients, and then we want to definitely get into all of the benefits that you've realized that. But yeah, just really quickly, Todd. Like I'm curious. Like, what is most important to get right in this kind of migration process?
Sure, and certainly if someone's doing it themselves and you've got and you don't mind maintaining two systems for a period of time, you can organize things, prioritize things, and have you and your team slowly do these types of things. But what we find is for a lot of folks is when it's time to go, it's time to go, and they'll reach out to folks like ourselves or Esri or somebody else to do you guys obviously to do a migration into a rock. And that process is usually at that point it's people are ready, and so it's a bit more of a one and done type of scenario. You come in and I'll talk a little bit about that if you don't mind at the end. But essentially, you want to come in and it's like moving a house, and you've got to do an inventory, you got to plan for it, do an inventory, you've got to pack everything up and move it, you've got to re-inventory at the back end. And it's always the case that somebody broke a lamp, something got left behind, and you've got to deal with that. So you have to do some triage at the end, right? And that's just part of that. And, we use all kinds of tools for that. There's third-party tools out there that do part of it. Esri does part of it. We have a bunch of scripts as well, Python libraries, which help us accelerate all this. And at the end of the day, though, you do have to roll your sleeves up, and that broken lamp and a couple of things that got left behind because it was esoteric data set or it was super vintage or whatever, so it doesn't get picked up. You've got to fix those things. It's usually kind of that one and done because along those same lines, you don't want to move one room at a time if you're paying somebody to do it and it's that planned out, right? It's like you want to try to get it all done. But that being said though, just to kind of lean into, I know another big concept is hybrid, which is you've got both going. is almost all of our clients are hybrid to some extent. But generally speaking, though, depending upon the size and age, vintage of the content in ArcGIS Online, they want to get it all done at once. Or if they're 15 years in ArcGIS Online when ArcGIS Online was new and they have tens of thousands of pieces of content in there, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe there's a line in the sand, right? And everything new forward, you start working with Enterprise and you start phasing stuff out or migrating over time. So there are times that you literally have two going, but certainly though it's the case that everyone keeps their ArcGIS Online, sometimes for external users. So you've got contractors or people that maybe don't want inside your environment or to give your own AD accounts or whatever that is. So there's definitely other reasons too why you would stay in a semi-hybrid way. But usually though, it's kind of move the bulk across and then just use ArcGIS Online for a subset, which is usually very focused for one reason or another. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it is, it's thank you for following up on the hybrid, because it's like it's not like I mean, it would be nice if we could just kind of just flip a switch and have everything where it needs to be, but it's never that easy. I'm curious, Joe was talking about things that were a surprise to him through the process. What do you hear clients like? Is there something that you hear consistently that they underestimate about migration?
Good call. And it really does come down to the size and the age of the company in their ArcGIS Online account. I think that we've run across a number of clients that have been in for 15 years, have thousands of projects they've done from, let's say, I'm just picturing an AEC client, and each one of those clients has hundreds or thousands of pieces of content in there. And then they kind of are surprised that it's going to take a pretty large effort to get out of there. But that is just the case. Whereas a lot of other folks, they've been in for 2, 3, 4 years and they're not as prolific as some other companies. And those aren't as big a deal. And there's usually no big surprises there. But for the larger content migrations, I think people just think that there's going to be a magic button from Esri that does it, and there's just really not, unfortunately. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of work to get it done. It certainly, we use tools, to do it. Some of them are Esri tools, but you have to use a bunch of other stuff too to get it done right. So I think that's surprising for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. I'm going to launch a quick poll. I'm curious from the participants' point of view, like what do you kind of think are your biggest roadblocks or concerns when you're considering a move to enterprise, right? We've talked a little bit around how what Joe's kind of move looked like. Todd's been sharing a little bit about what that looks like as well. And, from you guys' perspective, like what are you most concerned about thinking when it comes to thinking about moving? I realize we have that cost and licensing question on here, and it seems to be a
I wanted to chime in here that something Todd mentioned reminded me of something I haven't thought about for a couple of years now, is that we used this move as an opportunity to reorganize our data. That we had projects just saved on a network drive in a file geodatabase, and we had these weren't in our SDE database, but those were, and we had duplicate things, and we had layers that were in the wrong feature data sets, and we had feature data sets that weren't in the right projection. And we're using state plane coordinates. And I don't want to get too technical here, but it may answer some questions for some people who are listening in. Well, what about this? What about that? We use this as an opportunity to start a brand new SDE database that was clean, that we had a big spreadsheet. I opened an Excel spreadsheet with my team that I distributed to the team, and everybody said, oh, this should be called that. We had a lot of things named as acronyms that would say like NWSFL and that was the name of it, and you couldn't tell from that what it was. And we renamed something like National Wetlands instead of NWI for National Wetlands Infrastructure. Um, so we got to do all of that before launch, sort of doing our launch of
Mm.
Enterprise, and that was really helpful as far as the earlier question was how did you sequence it, and that was a big thing for us, was just sort of getting all of our ducks in a row, or our squirrels, or whatever you want to call it, getting everything organized before flipping that switch and going live with Enterprise.
Yeah.
If I, that's a great segue to the moving analogy that I did, which is how many times you ever got to your new house and you realized that you packed up a box of trash and moved it? That's not great. No one likes that feeling. And then it just stays in the garage for a year anyway. So better to get rid of that and clean it up and organize it before you move it. Very good point.
Yeah. So I just shared, I think everybody can see these at this point. But I just shared, it looks like, cost and licensing, data migration complexity, technical capability or staff to deploy and maintain enterprise. So those are kind of what's bubbling up to the top there. So thanks, Joe, for sharing a bit about your data journey. All right. Let's maybe take a moment to talk about like life in enterprise now. We talked a little bit about kind of what it looked like before, and kind of how we get there. But now, kicking this off to you, Joe, like what can you do now that you couldn't before? Now that you have enterprise.
So many things. And it's just life is getting better with GIS in general, with us having made the switch. It's one of those things where it's hard in the beginning. Change is hard for everybody. It was hard for us. But once you make that change, you move into that bigger house that Todd was talking about, and you've got a place for everything and less clutter in the new house. um, Once you get through the move is tough. But once you get through the move, it gets easier and easier to the point where a lot of things just seem to just kind of run themselves, instead of you having to manually update this report and update that map and post this, and we get new parcel data and now we have to do a parcel update. That we had a guide on updating our parcels, that took a day to update parcel data, and we do that. We were doing that about every 2 weeks. So about every 2 weeks, the GIS manager, who guess what was me now, would have to take a day and like work after hours and shut down GIS and replace layers and then push it live. And if something went wrong, then you were like your GIS mapping stuff was down and you had to send out apology emails and all this. Now I've gotten it streamlined using versioning to where I can update the parcel data that we get from our property appraiser. In about an hour or two, I can do the whole import, update, and then reconcile a version during business hours, and it's live. We have services then in the enterprise portal that are it's called publishing by reference. This is some of the terminology that I've learned in doing this. We can publish a service by reference, which means while our analysts are editing data in the database, the service that's published out to the portal to the public and your users is updating in real time. So I mean that is absolutely huge. One thing is you have more fine-tuned control over those services, because you can have map services that you push out and publish to ArcGIS Online, but you're using Esri's hardware, and um, they're in control of the performance of those map services. It's if they get hit with a lot of an influx of people hitting ArcGIS Online, your performance can tank, and you have no control over it. We've had multiple times since in the years that I've been with the county that ArcGIS Online has gone down entirely, and there's nothing you can do about it. With your stuff in your enterprise portal, as long as you or somebody is managing those servers and keeping those servers live, the performance is all up to you. You can control uptime, downtime, how fast things run, and you can change settings on the services themselves to where the things that are getting hit the most by the public or by your staff, those are running on like dedicated processes that you can determine. I want this many processes always available for keeping these services live. Another thing that we've found, and we've got, I think, a couple of slides to show you guys illustrate this. You can build and push out dynamic maps that change as users zoom in and out. These maps can be available through they can be available through field applications like field maps. So this example here this is a map of retention ponds, pools, and other types of, you can see a couple different types of icons here. There's a pool down there near Evelyn Street. That these are places being treated for mosquito larvae. We're in Florida, so we got lots of mosquitoes. And so our mosquito control department is pulling this up on their phones. So if Jen, if you'll go to the next slide, when they zoom in, when they're zoomed out, they get less detail to kind of clutter up the screen. When they zoom in to one of these places, you can see the icon there is for a pond, and there's the retention pond that it switches live. When you zoom in on it, it switches to the imagery base map, and you get the parcel lines detailing, and they can see where there's like an easement between these two houses where they can get back to the pond and treat it. And then if you go to the next slide. So another thing we've done is create a locator, our own locator, that gets updated nightly with our address and parcel and place name data. So when somebody goes to any of your maps or a mapping application and they click the magnifying glass to search, they can just start typing an address and it gives you relevant addresses that match that. It's not searching the whole world. This is absolutely huge for us, that the default Esri locator is searching the whole world. So you start typing 4784 and you're getting places in Alabama, Kentucky, Wyoming, wherever matches that. This locator very quickly finds just the addresses in Santa Rosa County, Florida. And if I start typing a parcel number, I'm on the phone with somebody, they go, I'm at parcel number 47-N1N. I start typing that parcel number and it pops up in the locator. If they say I'm at Taco Bell, I can start typing taco and I've got all the Taco Bells in Santa Rosa County immediately. So that's been absolutely huge for us. And then it's just automatically, excuse me, through enterprise settings, it's automatically included in all your maps and all your mapping applications. And this is just a demonstration that 4784 La Casa right there, it just zoomed. I was able to click zoom to, and it just zoomed me straight into the parcel, right into the house where that is. So
That's great. I'm curious, Rachel, just to bring you into the conversation, like what, you know, what is surprising about enterprise, right? Joe just walked us through how Santa Rosa is what they've the benefits that they've seen. I'm curious, just from your perspective, some additional insights there.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing that I was going to say actually, before you asked was, Joe is showing his field application, and if you have field staff that they're new, they're interns, they're it's publicly collected data, you can have them editing in a version that we were talking about, and then using the enterprise system, you can take that version and you can review that edit before you commit it to your database. So if someone, you know, so when they're going out to that detention pond, they don't that data doesn't automatically come in. Joe gets to look at it or his GIS analyst and say, oh yeah, okay, this is accurate. Oh, there was a typo here. And that review is possible because of versioning and because of using enterprise. So that was the thought that came to mind. But other surprising things about enterprise, I think we've talked a little bit, there is a lot. Joe has mentioned it. There are a lot of parts and pieces, and that can make it complicated and make it intimidating. And I think that's important to know is, Joe came from an IT background, and that's actually a pretty good place to be when you're running enterprise because there are a lot of if you are going to stand it up on your own, you need to understand how to set up those servers and then install the software and update the software. And it gives you a lot of control and you can put it behind your own firewall. And so those are some advantages, but it also it can be a lot to take on. And I remember when I was at my last job, kind of similar, I was asked to start taking over the enterprise administration, and I had done a lot of GIS work from the front end and not done the, IT side of it, let's go with. And it was a big learning curve. I had to ask a lot of people, do a lot of research. There's some really good documentation. I have to say, Esri does an awesome job with the documentation online, but you have to read it and you have to figure out what they're talking about. So, yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot. Yeah.
Todd, what have you seen from some of your clients in enterprise? Like what has that helped them to do?
Sure. I mean, I'll kind of take it down into the kind of database side for a second and then move into integration. So on the database side, some of the things we talked about are versioning, of course, and things like that. But just schemas for those that are database nerds, the ability to use schemas is a way to create separation in your database. So you can't have the people that are doing this type of editing that can't see or edit this type of data in the database or even get to some data sometimes. So that the security is better when you're down in that world for sure. So that's always fun. And you can do rule constraints and things that all kinds of database people love to do to make sure that you can't type in the wrong thing. You can't type in a number if it's supposed to be a letter and all that fun stuff that you can do inside of a database. And there's a lot more control at that level. And then to me, more importantly, what we see our clients get really excited about is that now it's a relational database that they know and that the rest of their IT folks know. And those people say, well, great, we're going to start taking some of this data now and pulling it into our data lake where we're doing high-end analytics and reporting. And we're really trying to kind of look for patterns. And at this point now, too, is we want to run AI. We need our data to be AI ready. Well, your data is not AI ready. If it's sitting in, a data store up in somebody else's cloud, you would need to bring it down on a nightly basis and massage it and get it into a way that it's potentially ready. But if it's living already inside of your world in a relational database, the geo database, it's very easy for you to integrate with the AI strategy, with the big data strategy, the data lake strategy, and with other systems. So we see that a lot too. That's usually kind of phase two in maturation after you get into enterprise world, is we see people say, I'm going to hook my documents up to this. I've got SharePoint, I've got this other document management systems. I want to be able to click on a capital improvement project that's underway and pull up, some of the imagery, some of the pictures people are taking on site, and be able to, get to maybe depending on who you are, who you log in as, I want to get to the receipts and the invoices associated with that and really look at the project and start using GIS as more of a really strong business tool and not just visualization or just GIS, but it's now a project management tool. And so we really see that that's where you start going as things build outside of ArcGIS Online. Once you get your base set up inside of a strong enterprise or enterprise GIS.
And I completely agree with you, Todd. And I think one thing that's really nice about Enterprise is you're able to share it. It gives you a lot of viewer licenses, so you can share that with people in your organization. You don't have to have everyone having an expensive license in order to see and use the products that you're creating. And it can become a really powerful tool really quickly. I think also with licensing, which is nice, not everyone has to have the desktop application. Not everyone has to learn Pro to be able to edit data or view data, or even analyze data. There are tools that you can set up in Enterprise for someone who's not as strong a GIS user. You know, you have your core GIS staff that have the licenses that allow them to create data, to publish data, to use the desktop application. And then you can give some people, editing licenses or viewing licenses, or just, click a button because I want to see how close, I don't know, how many Taco Bells are within 50 miles of my house, I think there's a lot there that you can do that's really powerful.
Well,
Absolutely.
one more question, then I want to kind of get to some of the questions that are bubbling up from the audience. But I'm curious, Rachel, I know that Rock Technologies has been a partner for Santa Rosa, and I'm curious, what is something that, as Rock is helping through managed cloud services and through time, like what kind of bubbles up or what happens, right? It's one thing to like get really excited about what enterprise can offer initially, but like once you're in it for months or years, like what does that look like?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I think we talked a little bit, I think it was Todd mentioned, kind of your planning, and you have a starting point and then you continue, and you start to grow, right? And then you need to manage that data growth. You need to start doing database maintenance. You need to start culling back some of that information. And in some cases, you need to grow. And that's one of the great things about being in the cloud. I know, like I've worked with Joe, there's, they've asked me to stand up new servers, or, adding data. Maybe you want to get into a new tool. Joe had mentioned the location. We set, or actually, I don't know if he actually did mention it, but the we set up a big data store for them so that they could do location tracking for their field staff. There's just there's so many pieces, and I think like a company like Rock, what we do, which is really helpful for our clients, is we can look at those services that Joe was talking about and say, okay, it looks like you had these services published and they're taking up this many resources, and we have the tools to say, you know what, they're not being used as much. I can see that you know, they've hardly been hit in the last 30 days or whatever the time frame is. And so you should change the way that service is being used, and kind of take resources away from that and put them in this location. And there's no extra cost for that. Like that's just kind of service management. That's not even adding resources. And then, yeah, so I think did I answer the question? Do you feel like that's
I feel like you did, yes.
okay? Great.
Can I chime in here? That Todd and Rachel have both gotten me really excited, reminding me of other things that you can do. And I see a question online, talking about um, a gain of, about credits, and Rachel's mentioned accounts, and Todd's mentioned a SQL database and what that gives you. Um, I asked Rachel one of our calls, I was like, we need to do some reporting. Can we stand up SQL Server reporting services, SSRS? Because now we've got the data in a SQL database that's right there in our cloud. she goes and she goes, yeah, we can do that. Oh, what will that cost us? Nothing. We can just add it to the SQL server that's already there. And or I think we ended up having a couple more calls with some experts, and they said, well, have it stand up a separate server so that resources and all this stuff that we didn't have to manage, which I want to encourage everybody, the complexities of it, you don't have to be a network administrator that knows everything about all of these different architectures to make positive changes. But we got SSRS stood up, and now we're building reports that look right into our GIS database and deliver reports, cool reports at the click of a button that we just could not do before. Um, Rachel mentioned the viewer licenses. We're using single sign-on with our environment. So county employees, when we get new employees come in, we just send them to cloud.santarosa.fl.gov and tell them to sign in. And they sign in with single sign-on. So if they have a county account, when we started this move, we had hundreds of ArcGIS Online users. And now we're down to, I think, 6. We had hundreds that we were paying for all these users because most of your users don't really need to edit data. Most of your users aren't collecting data, they're just consuming data. That only requires a viewer account, which you don't have in ArcGIS Online, but you have unlimited viewer accounts in, and maybe I shouldn't say that, but there's no real limit on your viewer accounts. So when you use single sign-on, what that means is one of the county commissioners or some high up, employee says, I want to see a map. They can just hit sign in with Enterprise, and they're viewing a map. They've got an account created for them automatically.
Yeah.
So that
And
is
that's
huge.
secure behind their firewall. You don't have to make it public in order to see that.
Well,
Right.
it's interesting. There's a question here that was submitted around, newer capabilities of ArcGIS Online, like smart forms, overlapping functionalities with attribute rules, hosted notebooks overlapping with scripted automation and geoprocessing services. And the question is like, how, if any, does that change the calculation of AGOL versus enterprise?
Well,
You
any of those things, remember your enterprise portal is your copy of ArcGIS Online. Portal works exactly the same as ArcGIS Online. In fact, if when you connect to Pro and if you're doing your licensing using an ArcGIS Online account, there's an actual in the settings, there's a portals tab, and ArcGIS Online is automatically there. When you go and add your enterprise, you're using your enterprise as your portal. You can do that and have your accounts in enterprise. So you use your account, your enterprise accounts, which may be free. Well, sorry, with Pro, you can't do that with a viewer account. But at any rate, it simplifies things having everything in all your accounts and everything in enterprise. And then instead of paying for geoprocessing, some of the things that you mentioned with credits in ArcGIS Online, there's no more credits in enterprise because the cost to you is the cost of the hardware, the cost of maintaining and running the servers and everything. So whereas we were spending, thousands and thousands of credits to do things in ArcGIS Online, now we just use our enterprise to do that same operation.
Yeah.
And there's no credits over there.
And I'll say, so you can do all those things in enterprise, like Joe said. And what's nice about enterprise is that you get to choose when you want that functionality. So yes, AGOL does usually have the latest and greatest, and enterprise you have to upgrade in order to get some of that functionality. But then it also goes the other way. Like I know everyone's talking about Web App Builder being deprecated, and if you're on ArcGIS Online, you can't use Web App Builder anymore. But if you're in Enterprise, you can be using that if you're on a version that still supports Web App Builder. And so you have a little more time, or you have control of the time, let's say, to migrate off of that deprecated application, for example, in order to and make the choice of when you want to upgrade your environment to get the new functions and also to make sure that you're ready for that change.
Awesome.
We're doing that with the workforce product that's now deprecated in ArcGIS Online. And we can only do that because we migrated. Somebody asked about migrating apps. What does that look like? We basically just stood up a workforce project published in Enterprise that matched what we had in ArcGIS Online. Because we had made that move already from ArcGIS Online to Enterprise, when they deprecated the workforce product in ArcGIS Online, we weren't affected. We're not affected until we go to Enterprise 12.2. That that change is made. So we're able, like Rachel was saying, to control when we make that upgrade rather than it being sort of forced on us because ArcGIS Online is upgrading, like it or not. We can space out and say we have this much time to migrate from workforce to ArcGIS field or to ArcGIS field maps before we go to that version of Enterprise where we no longer have workforce.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know we're almost at time. I'm going to ask, starting with Todd, if there's just one piece of advice or one thing that our participants joining us today need to know about moving from online to enterprise, what would that advice be? And while you're sharing this piece of advice, I'm going to launch a quick poll just because this is the start of the conversation, it's not the end. And so we're curious, what additional would you like to know about moving beyond ArcGIS Online? Okay, Todd, share, please.
Sure. Don't underestimate the complexity of the moves. This is definitely not like an agile type of thing usually, where you could just do little bits and fail quick. You want to do it old school. You want to measure twice, cut once. So it really does take a lot of planning up front. So don't underestimate it and do your planning.
Awesome. Rachel? Do you have a piece of advice?
I'll just take a moment to plug Rock a little. Like I know I said it's a little overwhelming and there's a lot you need to know, but if you have a partner like Rock Managed Services to take care of a lot of the back end work, you can make beautiful, amazing GIS products with Enterprise, with really no additional learning or education from what you're doing in ArcGIS Online.
All right, and Joe, how about you? What's your piece of advice?
I'm going to say first, I'm not paid by Rock to say this, but I'm going to take another moment to plug Rock. You use their expertise because I mean we've got a small team. Everybody's got their hands full. We're busy doing stuff. We don't want to bother our network team. We have a team of people that just handle network stuff here on-prem that keep everybody having an internet connection and a working computer. We never bother them at all with GIS server issues, backups, security stuff. We always reach out to Rock for that and leverage the relationship that we have with them. And they have I will say too, they have a great help desk that I don't have to blow up Rachel's phone or email with every little thing that we have to bother them with. Just put in a ticket. You go onto the site, save a screenshot of what you're dealing with, upload the screenshot to your ticket, mark it urgent if it's urgent. Otherwise, leave it medium priority and say, hey, can you guys handle this for us, and they really do. They step up and always handle things very quickly for us.
Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Todd, so much for this conversation today. We only scratched the surface. Thank you, the panelists, or for the attendees, for telling us what you want to hear more about. We will continue this conversation. Please be on the outlook in your inbox. We'll be sharing this recording as well as some follow-up material, and we'll be releasing a white paper in a couple of months on this topic as well. If you need to get a hold of any of these panelists, have questions, please reach out to hello@rocktech.net, and we will put you in touch and answer those questions. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone. Bye.